What does the Sears Tower and the World Trade Center and Terror drills have in common? Larry Silverstein, owner of the Silverstein Properties and the man who leased the World Trade Center towers, also happens to be the owner of the Sears Towers in Chicago. The complex was renamed the Willis Tower on July 16th, 2009, and is insured by global insurance broker Willis Group Holdings. The insurer is very important in the grand scheme, as can be seen with the World Trade Center, whose insurance settlement amounted to a cool $4.68 billion. A company named Kroll is the company tasked with providing security for the Sears Tower. After 9/11, Kroll purchased Convair, the very company that was responsible, surprise, surprise, for recovering data from World Trade Center hard drives after 9/11. Kroll also managed the bunker in the World Trade Center and is known to have had a hand in the London 7/7 bombings. The Willis Tower, as it now is called, just so happens to have an asbestos problem, much like the one that plagued the World Trade Center. Contrary to what many claim, there is clear evidence that shows asbestos problems within the Willis that there are asbestos problems within the Willis Tower. Remember that on September 11th, 2001, NORAD was conducting a war game drill that simulated planes flying into towers, right? Well, there is at very least, a very eerie correlation with the upcoming terror drills that will be conducted in Chicago in the next couple months here, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, actually, I can take it from there with a little update for
Okay,
you if you
go
don't
ahead.
mind. Since last year, a number of emergency drills and exercises have taken place in and around the city of Chicago, such as June 2010, emergency drills closed Chicago area roads. Also, Armageddon simulated in Chicago. Those are news headlines for you to check out from Chicago Breaking News and the Epoch Times. And then in May 2011, third tallest building in Chicago enhances security, conducts fire evacuation drills. So on June 10th, that would be 9 days from now, Chicago's Northwest Community Hospital and the U.S. Army Reserve will perform an emergency exercise called Red Dragon to prepare for any future event involving mass death.
You said your source on this was Epoch Times?
Well, on some of those previous drills and things
Yeah, because I know
in the
they
lead up.
very much are focused on China. And how does China play into this all? Man, it's tough enough to consider the Illuminati that we have to deal with, but what China is all about, I don't know.
And
I
is
don't know.
that
I've wrapped
where?
my head around it.
No, definitely not. And is that where Benjamin Fulford is based out of, and sort of all of
He's in
his?
Japan,
He's
but
in Japan.
yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot. We've had Dr. Charles Lee on the program to talk about China and specifically the Falun Gong and Falun Dafa and the organ harvesting.
But let's.
Crazy
Well, I
stuff.
was going to say let's not veer off too much
Sure,
into
sure.
that.
Go
But
ahead.
I think for folks, basically what we're saying and what we're boiling down here, and like I said, I'll have these stories that we're citing and we're citing in this segment and the previous segment. I'm going to have those all linked up and put together on a post here shortly on MediaMonarchy.com. But the drills, the amount of lead up in the drills are similar from the Willis Tower to the World Trade Center. Some of the same organizations like Silverstein and some of the private industrial intelligence complex, their involvement. And also I would want to point out that you mentioned Kroll and Convar and data recovery, and I would not miss the opportunity to point to the work of Richard Grove. And I think a lot of this he details in his old podcast series called 9/11 Synchronicity, going into all of that and the lead up and the intelligence and the insurance racket and all of those things leading up to 9/11. But
Yeah,
we
Richard
now
and I
have
are in touch, and he's going to be coming on the show. He
excellent.
promises me he's coming on, and he's just working on another edition of what is it? What
What
on
you
earth?
what you've been missing.
What you've been missing? Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, his website, Tragedy and Hope, a great site that James is
Yep.
also involved with.
But I think, again, Bob, we're basically saying the drills look the same, the ownership of Silverstein looks the same, and now we have Rahm Emanuel as the mayor of Chicago.
Right.
And you pointed out asbestos problems, and the interesting piece of the puzzle that I'm kind of offering here. And again, I don't feel like I've seen anybody make this, point and bring this out. Which again, I'll kind of ask folks to help spread this out when we get it posted up after this show. Is the similarities and the sort of predictive programming now of this ledge and skywalk on the Willis Tower that emulates the Israeli art student spy ring event in the World Trade Center called the Bee Thing.
Well, it'll be very interesting to see what happens with this. We're not saying for certain that something's going to happen, but we have to bring awareness to this, and hopefully it will spook them from trying to do something
Mm-hmm.
like this because they'll say, "Oh no, they know about us." But I don't know. That being said, they probably don't care. They like to do this stuff right in front of everyone's faces, anyways.
And of course too, it's difficult to be in the sort of need we bring up the Armageddon, doomsday rapture predictions. That yeah, being in the predictions game is a pretty dicey operation, and perhaps spending too much time on the drills could be something again where there was a point in time where that was of utmost pivotal importance within 9/11 truth and alternative activism and those communities. Could it be, as many have said, maybe that's a dead paradigm, and they've moved on to their other thing. I saw folks whose kind of primary focus, back in the day in the early 2000s were covering the terror drills. There were folks like Greg Nixon of Daily Dose of Terror, and even Daniel Abramson on False Flag News would cover, all the drills and those connections. And they both essentially got to the point where they were like, I'm done trying to follow this, because obviously they've already moved on to their next economical, false flag, which of course they were absolutely right, which then the public, found out about in 2008. So, as you said, it's important to discuss and at least kind of put out there and get on the record. So at least, we can try and plant seeds with folks. As I was mentioning, I saw the story about the skywalk in the New York Times paper the other day. And I don't know if I've mentioned to you before, but for me, a great sort of, culture jamming, if you will, or as even Jello Biafra called monkey wrenching the New World Order. As I flip through the newspapers, I always make sure I have a pen or pencil with me, and I make annotations and notes on the newspapers about the articles and some of the things that it says, so that I know the next person who's up in the break room on their lunch, and we've got hundreds of people that work there, are going to flip through the paper and then see little handwritten notes saying, for the real story, Google this term, or hey, what about this? I basically annotate the newspapers, so hopefully then folks flipping through it are like, hey, yeah, what was that about? I try and point out the discrepancies or give a little bit of context or subtext to it.
It's helpful, I think, to a lot of people to see that sort of thing and to have people tell them about alternative sources of
Mm-hmm.
media. I'll share a quick story, and then we'll take a quick break and continue our talk with James Evan Pilato on the show today, folks. But what happened to me today was kind of funny. I'm taking some classes, finishing up my degree in
Mm.
philosophy for whatever that's worth. But that aside, I'm taking this class of improvisation for political and social issues. Long story short, it's an improv class, really fun. Uh, I always make it about stuff that we talk about on the show. I try to, you know, incorporate as many conscious themes as possible. And sometimes I wish I could record the different improv games, kind of like Whose Line Is It Anyways
Mm.
type improv games, because I always come up with some truther, if you will, for lack of a better term, related commentary and comedy, and it's a good time. Anyways, long story short, you know how they asked the crowd for a suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
Well, my suggestion that I gave out was free energy, and the moderator went with that suggestion. And the cast that was on doing the improv had no clue what free energy was. No clue. to the point where that was the joke through the scene as we're doing scenes and we're doing this improvisation about free energy, but none of us know what the heck free energy is.
So that
Something,
became the gist of the skit. Hey, do you know
yeah,
what free energy is?
yeah, we're here for this free energy conference, but we don't know what free energy is. And long story short, this class was just after the skit was so hungry to figure out what free energy is exactly that they got a mouthful. And I'll tell
Nice.
you what I told them when we get back from break. This is the Bob Tuskin Show.